And like most of academia right now and where it stands in terms of gender roles, it is a destruction of femininity and a destruction of masculinity. That's what this study is about. All right, some more craziness from Brigham Young University. We have a new study that came out last week on princess culture. It focuses a lot on toxic masculinity and the idea that perhaps young boys should be playing more with princess dolls, reading more princess books, and making sure that they are immersed more in princess culture. Now, what I'm going to cover here does not come from the women's studies or maybe some other department you might think of with something like this, where you hear this kind of terminology and this focus on toxic masculinity and identitarianism, intersectionality. This comes from maybe one of the most conservative departments at BYU. This is from the School of Family Life. And I'm going to start here with the article that BYU put up themselves on the study that they did. This was done by Sarah Coyne, who seems like a wonderful person. And I've looked at a number of her other studies, actually. She does some really good work. And she gave a great devotional a few years back at BYU that I really liked, right? But this study it's beyond the pale to me, and just shows you how much this type of ideology, identitarianism, intersectionality, or postmodern critical theory has permeated places like BYU throughout all of the departments. Here's how the article starts out. It says, in the longest study to date on the impact of princess media on consumers, new research from BYU professor Sarah Coyne found that children who engaged with princess culture were more likely to later hold progressive views about women and subscribe less to attitudes of toxic masculinity. So this is the beginning and the opening. So that's setting up everything, right? In other words, traditional roles of women, bad. Okay, and masculinity, toxic masculinity, bad. That's what we're looking at here. And the entire study supports these two positions. It goes on and says participants who had a high engagement with princess culture were also less likely to adopt attitudes of toxic masculinity. Now, what does it mean by toxic masculinity? In the study itself, which I read thoroughly, the professor, Sarah Coyne, actually calls this hegemonic masculinity, which is a word of social justice, right? It's hegemonic means the power structure. It means the dominant power that is in place. So this is going right along with the rest of academia and their terminology. It's about conflict theory. How do we make sure that women are more progressive and get away from traditional roles and characteristics? This is exactly what the professor goes over. And how do we minimize masculinity? So much of this study is focused on this hegemonic or power-dominant masculinity. This is what the students at BYU are learning even in the School of Family Life. So they're less likely to adopt attitudes of toxic masculinity, which is, as they say, strict adherence to gender roles that support cultural norms favoring dominance by men, which is not really what the study shows, actually, at all. This is purely academic speak. It's new speak. And we're more supportive of allowing individuals to feel and show emotion. So that's a part of what they're looking at is toxic masculinity. Men that don't share, that don't express themselves as much as women do. Now, in the study itself, this was done came out just last week or the week before. It says this. These are the words from the study. Princess culture is criticized for contributing to gender stereotypes and poor body esteem. However, there is little longitudinal research examining these claims. Now, 5 years ago, she did this study on the same kids a little larger sample, she came up with the exact opposite conclusions to this. But of course, they were at more around 4 or 5 years old, and now they're a little bit older. So of course, there's going to be some changes. It goes on. This study examines associations between engagement with princess culture during early childhood and gender stereotypes. What are those stereotypes? Is she talking about traditional roles? Yes, that's what she's talking about. Body esteem and adherence to, and here's her toxic masculinity insertion, it's hegemonic masculinity in early adolescence. So the more young boys are immersed into princess culture, the less there is of hegemonic masculinity, the less toxic masculinity, according to her. It says several studies have found that princesses tend to be gender stereotyped, which may send limiting messages to young girls. I actually disagree with most of this. I do not think that is true. These stereotypes include a thin, beautiful ideal, that's oftentimes true, as well as submissive, emotional, and nurturing behavior. Ooh, nurturing behavior, look out. That is horrible. And submissive, really? Is that really what you see in most Disney princesses? I completely disagree. Even early on, this is not the character of early princesses in Disney movies. Just because she might be saved by a prince or a man in the end, sometimes, doesn't mean that she's submissive. She certainly doesn't act that way. For example, in Snow White, it's just the opposite. It says, for example, first-generation princesses, these are like in the 50s with Disney, emphasize traditional feminine characteristics. Horrible, right? Frequently engaging in cleaning and household tasks, nurturing, again, and focus on happily ever after. What a horrible thing. And in reality, if you go through the Disney movies and the princess movies, you'll see that that is only a part of it, a very small part. And that's not what the princess's character is about at all. But because it's there at all, nurturing, for example, that's a problem. We can't show that type of a traditional feminine role. And like most of academia right now and where it stands in terms of gender roles, it is a destruction of femininity and a destruction of masculinity. That's what this study is about. Content analysis have found that modern princesses, this is what they call third generation. This would be like from Mulan on to modern day princesses, tend to be more androgynous. So this is a good thing for them. And what does androgynous mean? It means a mixture of feminine and masculine characteristics and traits, right? That's what society wants now, right? Let's take away too much femininity for women and too much masculinity for men. We want both to be the same, similar, right? We want both to be androgynous. It's exactly what they're saying here, that this is a positive thing. They're shown as more independent. That's probably good, although I don't know that it's more than what you would have seen previously. Less likely to have romantic relationships. Why is that bad? In fact, Professor Coyne here continues to say that, the great thing about the newer ones are that there is no romantic relationship, that they're not dependent on men at all. Is that really good? Is that something that we really want to nurture in our society with men and women? That independence is the be-all? We have come a long way in our idea of family and of courtship. And I don't think it's all good. It goes on here. Some more. It says, despite these changes, even strong female characters continue to be feminized outside of their films by Disney marketing. For example, so again, see, feminizing a woman is a bad thing to them. This is in the School of Family Life at BYU. They continue to be feminized outside of their films by Disney marketing, for example, altering their image by adding makeup, softening facial features, or wearing more feminine clothing. They want androgynous women and androgynous men. There's a section in the study that is called Themes of Hegemonic Masculinity, or more commonly known as toxic masculinity. Here's how it starts out. Although ideas regarding masculinity vary culturally, a particularly concerning vein of masculinity is hegemonic or hyper-masculinity. Now, notice that there is no section in here, even though this is about princess culture. There is no section in here called Themes of Hegemonic or Toxic Femininity anywhere. It goes on and says that hegemonic masculinity or power-dominant masculinity is typified by aggression, rejection, or denial of any weakness, emotional stoicism, homophobia, control, the rejection of anything feminine, and sexual prowess. What do you mean the rejection of anything feminine? You're rejecting everything feminine here in this study. That's what they're doing. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that hegemonic masculinity wants a traditional, stereotypical feminine woman and then say that hegemonic masculinity or toxic masculinity is the rejection of anything feminine. This is so typical of how identitarians work. It is so convoluted. It is completely pulled out of reality and logic and rationality. These are the words of someone who is steeped in academia and in the newspeak of postmodern critical theory, intersectionality, feminism. There were several questions and statements that were used in the methodology here that the parents would go over with their children and ask them or give them the statements and have them rank these statements. One of them, for example, that for them turned out very poorly was girls should be more concerned with becoming good wives and mothers than desiring a professional or business career. Why would you make that an either or? What is the point of that? See, that is agenda driven to me. I'm sorry, that's agenda driven. It's creating an either or situation. Why do you need that? It's bad then for someone to say, I mean, I wanted my wife to be a stay-at-home mom. So I guess that's hegemonic masculinity. That's toxic masculinity. Never mind the fact that she wanted it also. But I guess she's just adhering to that toxic masculinity. Never mind that my kids are all out of the home now. And she's an extremely successful business person in every facet now that the kids are out of the house. Maybe if she and I both had more princess culture, then we wouldn't have had so much toxic masculinity in our relationship. This is just another example of how much this postmodern critical theory, this intersectionality and critical social justice mentality has permeated Brigham Young University. It is everywhere. This is what is being taught to the college kids at BYU. These are the words and the concepts, the whole idea of conflict theory, of the oppressor and the oppressed, the oppressor man and the oppressed woman. And they're not hiding it, right? It's going to, all of these types of things are going to come out more and more, especially this year, with the new social justice classes that have been implemented at BYU. In conclusion, I'd like to contrast what they're saying about their first-generation princesses, such as Snow White. What is Snow White really about? They would put the narrative in here that it's about a woman that is asleep and docile, and that Prince Charming comes along and kisses her and saves her. How much of the movie is about that? Even building up to that. It's what, the last minute or two of the movie? What is the whole thing about? It's not about toxic masculinity. It's about toxic femininity. It is Snow White getting away from toxic femininity, which is represented and personified by the queen/witch. Prince Charming is not toxically masculine. He barely has a character or a word. It's about Snow White, who is a very independent woman leaving the castle, getting away from the queen and the witch who is trying to track her down and poison her with toxic femininity. And it's about her being a nurturer with the 7 dwarfs. Why is that bad? How does that fit into toxic masculinity? So one of the great traits of a mother, a nurturer, is toxic masculinity. That's what this says. That's what they're equating. And are these teachings going along with the family proclamation? Do they go along with the words of the prophets? Are these things that are supporting a family structure? Look, I want my wife and my daughters to be independent in the sense that they can make their own decisions and that they can be great wives and mothers and women, individuals, whatever they choose to do, whether it's be a stay-at-home mom, whether it's a career, whatever that is. That is not what is being taught here. And the idea of gender in the family proclamation here is being pulled down, criticized, and demeaned. Thanks for listening.